The Bronx already has much of what it needs to transform its local economy and become a thriving, healthy borough. However, Bronxites currently do not have enough meaningful ownership or control over our futures. The Bronxwide Coalition is working to create a Bronxwide 30-year economic development plan that includes projects for shared wealth and community ownership. To transform the local economy, our work focuses on 7 sectors: transportation and mobility, manufacturing and technology, housing and land use, health, food, energy and environment, and education and workforce. Let's start with a quick overview of the local economy. When it comes to jobs, the majority of Bronxites travel outside of the borough to work. In fact, Bronxites hold less than half of private sector jobs in the Bronx, around 46%. Only a small percentage of Bronxites live and work in the borough, 106,000 residents. That is about 1 in 4 residents that are employed. Additionally, many people, about 75,000, commute into the Bronx for jobs. Before the pandemic, the Bronx set employment records for over a decade, and the unemployment rate hit a record low of 4.2% in December 2019. During the same period, the Bronx had the lowest median household income in the city, the highest poverty rate, and 1/3 of households were severely rent burdened and spent more than half of their income on rent. We believe that the Bronx can build an economy that supports shared wealth and ownership and collective governance over economic assets, a concept known as economic democracy. This demands a significant investment in education for people from all walks of life to re-examine long-held beliefs about how our society and economy functions. Successfully transitioning our economic system towards one that is democratic, equitable, and sustainable will require us to learn how to put people and planet over profit. Now let's take a look at each sector.
Transportation. There are more than 7,000 workers in the transportation sector in the Bronx. These are truck drivers, school bus drivers, taxi cab and rideshare drivers, as well as other couriers and messengers. When it comes to how we get around, more than half of the commutes on public transit average more than an hour. Although 23% of Bronx residents live and work in the borough, 40% of residents commute to Manhattan for work. Another 16% commute to Brooklyn or Queens, and 7% commute to Westchester. Additionally, public transit commuters in the Bronx are more likely to be people of color and women. Most also live below the poverty line and work in service jobs. There are many more dimensions of transportation for us to understand and consider, including the impacts of highways in the Bronx, micro-mobility options like bike shares and e-scooters, and options for pedestrians to get around our neighborhoods safely. Planning for the future of transportation means having mobility options that truly meet our everyday needs, are accessible, and benefit our communities. We need to center the visions and voices of essential workers and Bronxites. Investments in transit have the potential to become a key part of the growing green economy, not only reducing the city's carbon footprint, but also providing new, family-sustaining jobs and careers that work for people and the planet.
Manufacturing and technology. When we say manufacturing, we are simply talking about the production or creation of things. You may know that the Bronx has a history of manufacturing. Our waterfront had factories that produced things like building materials, textiles, and instruments. Part of the disinvestment that the Bronx faced in the 60s and 70s came as a result of factory owners who decided that they could move their work elsewhere to avoid unionization and pay lower labor costs. In the Bronx, food manufacturing is the top industry in this sector and employs over 1,600 workers in the borough. While we have a legacy and existing base in manufacturing, decisions about land use in New York City have made it difficult for businesses and jobs in this sector to stay here. Due to rezonings, which is when you change the use of the land from one type to another, the Bronx lost over 1 million square feet of industrial space between 2007 and 2016. This ongoing loss in space has led to a loss in jobs. Since 2016, the Bronx has lost 1 in 4 manufacturing jobs. Investing in the manufacturing and technology sector in the Bronx means investing in innovation. Innovation allows our local economy to adapt and grow. The Bronx can and should be a hub of innovation and a place where things are made. We can have world-class manufacturing and innovation here that is dedicated to addressing community needs like energy efficiency for our buildings, reducing pollution, and education and medical technology that are owned and controlled by our people in our neighborhoods. As available land for manufacturing shrinks, there is both an urgency to act and an opportunity to build a manufacturing sector based on shared ownership, democratic governance, and self-determination.
Housing and land use. The Bronx is considered the most affordable borough in the city and is home to about 30% of New York City's public housing and subsidized housing units. Yet, as we all know, the Bronx is not affordable to folks who live here. Many of us are rent burdened and dealing with some of the worst housing conditions in the city, including the highest rates of severe overcrowding, the highest rate of serious housing code violations, and an eviction rate 3 times as high as any other borough. At the same time, we also have so many assets here, including land. There are nearly 62 million square feet of vacant land in the Bronx. That's larger than the size of Van Cortlandt Park. Land use in our neighborhoods is too important to be left to a narrow and wealthy few. In dense cities like New York, land is essential to the creation of neighborhoods where we belong and can thrive. As rezoning has become increasingly common as part of the city's economic development strategy, community ownership of land and land use can lead to more than just a seat at the table. It positions residents and workers as the people with rights to determine how and for whom land is used.
Health. The Bronx healthcare and social assistance ecosystem is our biggest and also the fastest growing employer. It has over 90,000 employees and includes people who work in childcare, food banks, and shelters, as well as home health aides, registered nurses, and more. However, despite the size of the healthcare industry and concentration of healthcare institutions here, the Bronx is the least healthy county in all of New York State, ranking number 62 over the last 10 years in a row. The Bronx has the highest rates of asthma hospitalizations, diabetes deaths, and drug hospitalizations. Additionally, the average life expectancy in the Bronx is 4 years lower than Manhattan's. With the COVID-19 pandemic, higher rates of chronic diseases and other underlying conditions meant that Bronx residents were twice as likely to die from COVID-19. We see an opportunity to improve health and economic outcomes simultaneously, as existing institutions can be shifted to focus on deeper and more cost-effective root causes instead of expensive sick care. Bronxites deserve to live a healthy life that isn't a cost burden.
Food. Did you know that the Bronx feeds the city and region? The Hunts Point Food Distribution Center is one of the largest in the world and includes over 150 public and private wholesalers who generate more than $3 billion in sales annually and employ over 10,000 people directly and indirectly through on-site work, delivery, and logistics. And yet, most community members go hungry every day. The Bronx sees disproportionately high rates of food insecurity, with the South Bronx having the highest rates in the country at 37%. 1 in 5 children in the Bronx has experienced food insecurity at some point in their life. Alongside the other food-based employers in the borough, we know that the Bronx holds a wealth of existing skill sets and knowledge from those involved in food manufacturing, food transport, food service, and cuisine. The Bronx is also home to great gardeners who cultivate the community gardens and urban farms that feed into community-run farmers markets around the borough. Our goal is to think about how we can take a sustainable approach to food, making sure we take care of ourselves, our land, and our environment.
Energy and environment. We know the Bronx has been deeply impacted by environmental racism and continues to fight against the effects of climate change. Environmental racism looks like highways and waste facilities that burden our borough with outcomes like air pollution, disproportionately high asthma rates, and extreme heat. The Bronx was ranked the worst county for COVID-19 death rates and respiratory hazards in the country because of these long-standing issues. Even the buildings we live in impact our environment and health. In New York City, most of our carbon emissions from energy usage come from buildings, around 70%. However, local residents and groups have been organizing, visioning, and planning for decades, creating resiliency plans, leading energy efficiency projects, and developing new assets like community-owned solar. We can transform highways and other infrastructure which have separated and polluted our neighborhoods into community assets that promote health and connectivity. We can seed worker cooperatives to retrofit our aging buildings, which contribute nearly 70% to the city's carbon emissions. With a commitment to racial equity and shared ownership, we can build on the people's power here in the Bronx, and together we can create a green economy that will power our communities and provide safety, health, and wealth for all of us.
Education and workforce. Let's talk about education and the workforce. Did you know that the Bronx is the youngest borough in the city? However, young adults in the 15th Congressional District, which covers the West and South Bronx, are dealing with the worst economic prospects in the country. Among the young adults living there, 1 in 6 is unemployed, 1 in 3 lives below the poverty line, and 1 in 5 does not have a high school degree. This means we are not properly supporting and preparing our young adults and their ability to thrive here in the Bronx. In 2019, a federal agency reported that over the next 5 years, the fastest growing jobs across the country are the ones with the highest educational requirements. To transform our local economy, we need to overhaul our education and workforce development systems to ensure they are fully resourced, coordinated, and connected to a comprehensive understanding of the growing sectors in the borough. This will ensure that youth, immigrants, returning citizens, and other adults have the ability to access free and ongoing educational opportunities and are prepared to take on jobs that pay family-sustaining wages and build careers.
Now that you know more about the economy of the Bronx, it's time for you to join our work in transforming it. Join our coalition member organizations to create economic development project proposals for our Bronxwide People's Plan. You can learn more about it here. Thank you.